starting to wonder if they just kept delaying this one in the hopes that people would confuse it for the other Batman movie this year. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2022 superhero horror film, Morbius. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Morbius stars Jared Leto, Matt Smith, and Adria Arjona, and was directed by Daniel Espinosa. It tells the story of Dr. Michael Morbius, played by Jared Leto, who accidentally genetically self-inflicts a form of vampirism while trying to cure a rare blood disease. This latest entry in Sony's Spider-Man universe has been a long time coming. 5 delays and more than 2 years after its original release date, Morbius has finally arrived. Much like just about every superhero getting their first movie these days, I knew absolutely nothing about this character when the movie was first announced. So I wasn't particularly excited, and the eventual trailers did nothing to bolster any sort of excitement, but that's not really that weird for me in these cases. I need to see the movie to get a sense of the character and what they're all about, so my initial apathy towards a new-to-me character can turn into enjoyment after seeing the film. Shang-Chi is a great recent example of that. People were ragging on Morbius before it ever came out, but the same thing happened with Venom, another SSU film I liked, so I still went into this hopeful. Well, even though I don't know anything about the character of Morbius, I can tell you that this is not the Morbius movie that fans were hoping for. It could have been good. The building blocks were there, likely from the comic source material. The character was kind of interesting, the premise had potential, the setup and parts of the first act were okay, but man, is the rest of this film rough. Like, shockingly so. I had no expectations for this character, and even though I wasn't excited for this movie, I was hopeful that it would be decent, and even I came out of this movie thoroughly disappointed. We're only 3 films in so far, but it seems like the SSU is really going for a cheesy 2000s throwback vibe for all of its movies. It works with Venom because of the comedy and the kind of campy goofiness of everything, but Morbius takes itself far too seriously for that 2000s feel to be anything positive. It's been a while since I came across a film so poorly constructed. It's borderline incoherent at times. The script is all over the place. Admittedly, it probably wasn't helped all that much by the editing, but this is such a choppy movie. It's very evident that there were a number of reshoots, and the whole thing feels like it was cut up at random and reshuffled half a dozen times. There are sudden jumps in the story that make very little sense, way too many plot conveniences, intended emotional character moments that have next to no impact because they weren't set up properly, and on top of all that, the pacing is awful. It jumps back and forth between mind-numbingly slow moments and frenetic sequences that are barely even coherent. Towards the end of the second act, the people around me in the theater were really starting to get antsy, shifting around and stretching, checking their phones, talking to each other. It definitely dragged, and I thought for sure it had to be another 2.5-hour-long superhero movie. But nope. Somehow, this was only 1 hour and 44 minutes, including credits. I want to say that, as a character, Morbius has some pretty interesting abilities. Nothing about how they arise makes any sense, but the abilities themselves are kinda cool. There's a sort of research montage where Morbius is figuring out and testing what he can do, and in isolation, that was okay and somewhat interesting. But man, when these powers get incorporated into actual action sequences, I was not prepared for how bad it was gonna look. I guess they were going for 2000s cool, but yikes. Eye-rolling speed ramping, very bizarre makeup effects, this constant wispy blur thing, extremely chaotic camera movement and editing. The movie is full of these awful swirl fights in the dark, and the way it's done, you can't even make out what's happening. You can't tell who's who, and honestly, after a while, you don't even care anymore. So yeah, I was mildly hopeful for this movie, but it's just plain rough. I think the character of Morbius had potential, but this movie was not it. This feels sloppy and haphazardly thrown together, which honestly I don't understand considering all the delays. They literally had years to fix this and try to salvage it in post, but didn't, which makes me wonder, why bother delaying it so much? The late lifting embargo told us all we needed to know about the studio's confidence in this film, or lack thereof, so I just don't get it. This movie certainly sets up for more, but I don't know, this might already be the nail in the coffin for this particular branch of the SSU. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Really, the only pro here is the premise. Again, this is a character I knew nothing about, but I have to imagine most of the credit for the premise and setup here belongs to the comics and the source material. I do think Morbius is an interesting character, and I was pleasantly surprised by the extent of his motivations here. I think the structure and editing had issues, but I liked the general content of the first act. But once things really get underway beyond its setup and premise, this movie takes a turn for the worse. On the con side, the biggest issue was the script. It's all over the place. The story's barely coherent. It's written extremely poorly and put together even worse. I mentioned it earlier, but I suppose some of the incoherence is the fault of the editing as well, but it's shockingly unstructured and nonsensical. It barely feels like a complete story, and instead comes across more like a series of randomly ordered scenes. All of that combines to create a remarkably dull and unevenly paced movie that easily feels 45 minutes longer than it actually is. The second con is also a very big one, and is the action/visual effects. In isolation, I'll admit that the visual effects are sometimes okay. The undulating echolocation ears are certainly a haunting image that has not yet left my brain, but some of the visual ideas are creative at least. But when they're applied to action sequences, they look terrible. It's so poorly shot, so poorly edited, and the CG is startlingly bad looking. I imagine people will compare this film's swirl fights to the goo fights in Venom, and I would say that's an apt comparison, but I think these swirl fights are even worse. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Morbius or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Morbius 2 out of 5 paws, and I think that's being a bit generous. It has a decent premise and some interesting conceptual ideas, but it's so poorly constructed that the story's as incoherent as the film's many frenetic swirl fights. I would recommend Morbius to people looking for a cheesy but fairly self-serious 2000s superhero movie throwback. It's not funny like Venom, so I don't know how much entertainment people will be able to glean from it, which I think puts this movie in a tough spot, because I doubt that even big fans of the Morbius character will have a good time with this one. If you liked Morbius, I would recommend Venom. It was the first movie in Sony's Spider-Man universe, and has a similarly cheesy 2000s throwback feel to it, but approaches it in a much more humorous and campy way. If you like the mix of biochemistry and vampires, you might want to watch I Am Legend for an interesting alternative take on the vampire genre. And if you're looking for another kinda incoherent vampire movie with similar effects quality, you should check out Van Helsing. Very different type of story, but it's the kind of movie that the SSU seems to continue to emulate. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Morbius? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie about an experiment gone wrong? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.